Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Recovery Mental Health Clinic. My name is Zoe Clues, and I'm a hypnotherapist specialising in complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, and many other issues.
Oh, that'll be me then.
Yes, it'll be you. Back in the room now.
Yes, this is, I was just thinking to myself, this is very much kind of the black and white mental health show. I just noticed you're dressed in black, I'm dressed in white. And my name is Neil Sharp. I am head of an organisation called the Stress Management Society. I'm really pleased to be back here with Zoe after a couple of weeks where we've not been running the sessions together. And really, this is a great opportunity for us to further explore this subject that we've been chipping away at for the last 6-7 weeks now, and ensure that we've got a platform and a space where we can all kind of share our thoughts, feelings, perspectives, and for those of you that have taken the time to write in to have your questions answered. So Zoe, what's been going on?
Well, there's kind of a few things I'd like to talk about today, as well as obviously answering the questions that we've been sent in. Firstly, obviously, we had the march, the Peaceful Freedom March at the weekend, and it was lovely. We got some lovely feedback to one of the members of Recovery about the mental health clinic. So thank you to whoever that was. Hope you're watching. A massive thank you. It's always lovely to know. And I wanted to acknowledge that, and I also wanted to acknowledge that we're coming to the end of Stress Awareness Month. And of course, the 10th to the 16th, correct, is Mental Health Awareness Week. So I think all of these things are important topics to discuss, as well as answering everyone's questions. So what are your thoughts on the all of the above now?
Well, firstly, Stress Awareness Month is something that we have been running for a very long time. The theme that we put out for it this year is regain connection, control, and certainty. And obviously, as we've been discussing over the last few weeks, and the things that we've been working on behind the scenes for a very long time, is the fact that many of us, if not most of us, have had that sense of certainty taken away. We don't know when this is going to come to an end or what's going to happen next. We don't have the control over what we can do, when we can do it, how we do it, who we do it with, and even what we can wear whilst we're doing it. And that's obviously had a significant impact on people's mental health and has created a huge amount of stress and anxiety. But for me, the most tragic one was the loss of connection, where we haven't been able to spend time with friends, family, loved ones. Hugs and kisses have been weaponized. And that's why obviously what happened on Saturday was just such a wonderful celebration, where people were celebrating being able to be out in the sunshine. It was very much a carnival atmosphere of people coming together and connecting and embracing. And I think we need that now, particularly as we've got the roadmap out, and we're kind of, in this pathway to returning to the life we used to remember. That we start looking at, we might not be able to control external factors, but we can very much look at what we are going to do and how we're going to show up. Your attitude, your behavior, your thoughts, your feelings are your own. No one can restrict or regulate those. Might be able to restrict or regulate what you do and where you do it and how you do it, but they can't restrict what's going on inside of yourself. And this is the one thing that I think we need to assert control over again. Power, as I mentioned many, many times, is the ability to do or act. So let's look at what we can do and how we can act to empower and inspire ourselves to be able to show up in a way that's going to serve us and our communities, and in ways that we can come together to stop fighting each other, because actually that's just creating further gulfs and further divisions. It was Machiavelli that said, if you want to defeat the enemy, get them to fight each other. Well, actually, we're so busy fighting each other. Mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, pandemic, Brexit, remain, Labour, Tory. There's enough polarity in the world. I think this is the moment we need to put our differences to the side and look at how do we come together, support each other, and most importantly, protect the most vulnerable members of our society, whether that's from socioeconomic factors or obviously the one that we're here to talk about is mental health, because I personally feel, and I know that you're on the same page as me on this, Zoe, when it comes to mental health, we are failing the most vulnerable members of our society, which is why it's such a big issue. And as we come to the end of Stress Awareness Month, which has been incredible this year, we've had more traction. We've had 1,000% increase in people that are engaging with us and following us and accessing our resources. And for anyone that's interested, there's a bunch of free resources at stress.org.uk/Stress Awareness Month. But we're now leading into Mental Health Awareness Week, which is the second week in May. And I think this is something that would be a good place for us to start talking about, Zoe. And the theme this year is nature. Now, when the theme, because Mental Health Awareness Month is not our month, it is put together by an organisation called Mental Health Awareness Week. When they put the theme of nature, I thought, well, that's, you know, that's all well and good, but walking in a park and hugging a tree is not necessarily going to make you feel better. It might, but it might not. But I've decided to take it a step further. It's not just connect with nature, connect with our nature. And our nature is we are social creatures, that we require contact with our fellow human beings. We require the freedom to be able to express ourselves and speak openly, to come together. That is our nature. So the theme this year, I'm taking it further, is not just connect with nature, connect with our own innate nature. And obviously this is something that we spent a lot of time talking about. So Zoe, like, you know, given the fact that you know, as a therapist, you're working with people that are experiencing challenges, and obviously the work that you're doing with the campaign. What are your thoughts around kind of this concept of nature as an antidote to mental health?
I think it's beautiful. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things about, you know, we're talking about nature rather than our own innate nature, which I'll go into a little bit further in a moment, is nature's so accepting. You know, I think it's almost, it just sort of soaks up all of that white noise. And of course, you know, grounding is the opposite of anxiety. So walking, you know, a really long walk really can sort you out in a way that many other things can't, actually. I think nature has been one of the most important coping mechanisms over the last year for a lot of people. In regards to connecting with our own innate nature, most of my work is really about connecting people at a deep level to who they really are. And the way I see it is this, you know, we are born, you know, feeling okay, feeling good, not that we've an awareness of that because we're a tiny little baby, but we're born feeling okay. Then I think what happens is life happens to us, adverse experience happens to us, trauma happens to us, perhaps our caregivers were traumatized or not emotionally available in some way, and there's a myriad of ways people cannot be emotionally available to you. So we don't get that really healthy, many of us haven't had that really healthy mirror that we need when we're you know, a baby or an infant or a toddler or a child or even a teenager. The mirror that says to us, reflects back to us, you're okay just as you are. So then I think what happens is, you know, part of us breaks off and becomes like the collapse, I call it the collapsed self. And the collapsed self believes all that stuff about itself, like I'm not good enough, I'm defective, I'm unworthy. It goes into the compare and despair, looks at other people, thinks they're better than me at every level. Then from there, you know, we don't want to feel these painful, shameful kind of feelings. So we create a mask. We think, right, I'm going to be really successful, or I'm going to be really thin, or I'm going to get a really great car, a really great boyfriend, a girlfriend, or this, that, the other. And we move forward in life creating, you know, wanting to get away from that feeling of the collapsed self, which was never true in the first place, by the way. It's just we get split off from our own innate nature by what happened to us. And we think what happens to us is who we are. And that's the sort of fundamental flaw in what happens, really. So a lot of the healing work and the therapy work I do is about connecting someone to who they really are. So we create this kind of, you know, facade, mask. It's also part of who we are as well. You know, our achievements and what we create is also a part of who we are. But then what happens is people respond to that and they're like, oh, aren't you successful? Or aren't you this? Or aren't you that? Or all of these things. But we're still coming a lot of time from the collapsed self that believes that we're not good enough. And so we think, I need to create more. I need to become bigger and more successful and add all these kind of like bells and whistles on. When actually, you know, the true goal is feeling really, really comfortable in your own skin. And I think that's where imposter syndrome comes in, because people respond to the mask. We think, no, that's not really who I am. You know, I'm going to be exposed because really I'm this person that's not good enough, defective, unworthy. We were never that. It's just that that's the experience, you know, our trauma happens, all these adverse experiences happen, and it splits us off from our true nature, from who we really are. And who we really are is about just feeling really okay and really comfortable in our own skin. We don't have to be the most dazzling person in the room. We just have to be really comfortable with who we are. I think it's a great goal, being really comfortable in your own skin. So I think connecting to your true nature is a wonderful way of having fantastic mental health, because actually having really good mental health is about becoming really whole, which is about accepting all parts of yourself. We've all got the parts of ourselves that we like, that are charming, witty, can do this, competent, etc. And we've all got parts of ourselves that are vulnerable and messy and, you know, don't feel so good. And I think good mental health is about including all of that and being as compassionate to ourselves as possible, particularly the parts that are messy and unhappy and, you know, get jealous or insecure. And if we're able to sit with that part of ourselves and be kind to ourselves and sit with our own vulnerabilities, then I think it's probably one of the most potently healing things that we can do. So I think it's a great thing.
I just want to pick up on that because there's a few threads that you've put out there that I think are really powerful. That, you know, I talk about this all the time. That you know, people very much live in their stories. Their perspective, their views, their beliefs about themselves are not the truth. They're just stories they've developed over time, and we've held these stories for so long, we start to believe them.
Yeah.
But often those stories are not even your own. They were given to you by your parents, your siblings, your friends, school teachers, society, you know, media are programming you with these stories. And actually, a big part of it, I'm sure this is a big part of the work you do as well, is unpicking those layers of stories, and like layers of an onion. And as you get deeper and deeper and deeper, you start to connect with actually the truth that lies within, and that's the authentic self. Or you know, the way I would see it, and it's the language I use may sound a bit hippie and woo-woo, but it's where people are connecting with their sovereign cosmic power. With, you know, that's really where you know, underneath all those layers of story, there's a gem, and that gem is you, that was untainted by layers of story. And what's happened is over the last 12 months, you know, we already had layers of stories, but then all of a sudden, like, you know, this whole scenario came along and we just dumped a whole load of new stories on us about what we feel about. And it's just like, now it's like, you know, because you may question certain things, you may be, you know, the story you now have, or the story that society's giving you about yourself, is you're a conspiracy theorist because you choose not to believe things, or because you question things, you're a disruptor, or whatever. And it's all of these new stories, which means that there's a lot of people that are just, for wanting to have a peaceful life and to avoid confrontation, they just succumb to new layers of stories. Now, here's the thing. Whatever this is, you know, whether it's to do with how you live your life, what you believe, what you do, what you eat, what you wear, whatever, like, you need to really take a step back and think, is this the truth of who I am? Am I living in congruence where my words and actions, thoughts and beliefs are all in alignment? And if not, what needs to change to ensure that I'm in alignment? Because the moment you have that lack of congruence, you start losing trust and faith in yourself, which also then means that you stop loving yourself. And how many of us have now got poor relationships with ourselves, the most important person in your life, because of some of the things that have happened over the last 12 months?
Yeah, exactly. There's been, you know, and, you know, going back to what you were talking about earlier, and the protest, I keep calling it a festival. My subconscious mind thinks it's a festival.
It was a festival.
I keep calling it a festival. You know, but I think it was, you know, what you were talking about earlier as well, just going back to the earlier point, was that one of the most devastating things has been the lack of a connection, is the separation and segregation. Now, I think Saturday was a really beautiful exercise, like a huge exercise in the most amazing co-regulation. Now, I talk about co-regulation and self-regulation all the time. Self-regulation is regulating our own emotions. Co-regulation is when we regulate our emotions through connection with others. Now, lots of us haven't been taught to self-regulate. You know, if you've done a lot of therapy, if you're a therapist working in this kind of field, you know, it can, and you've had a good childhood, or you've done, you know, some good work around any of these things, you'll be practiced in self-regulation and self-care. And many of us were just thrown into this situation without ever having practiced it, and had to learn self-care, had to learn how to self-regulate. And all of the ways in which we would have regulated with others were removed. So there's a lot of issues with isolation, and just people just sitting with their issues and unresolved traumas, and a lot of pain and sadness. And that's why I think one of the main reasons we saw mental health issues go through the roof in the way that we did. So Saturday, I think, was healing for many people. It really, really was, because there was just such co-regulation and connection, and a really peaceful, you know, but joyous, you know, that peace, that underlying energy of joy, you know, it was great.
And what I love is that it wasn't just one issue. Like, you know, it was kind of a broad collection of different sort of things that people wanted to express that were brought under this kind of collective banner. You know, some people may have been there to talk about the medical freedom bill or kind of coercion into vaccination. Some people may have been around restrictions on our freedoms, human rights, civil rights. Some people may have been around masks. There was such a broad variety of different issues that got people to stand up and say, no, you know what, like, this is something that's important to me. But that's how it should be. We should be able to come together. And even if we're not all talking about the same thing or even agreeing on the same thing, we have more in common than we do that separates us. And when we can find that commonality and when we can find kind of that shared humanity, I think is when we can start the healing process. Because really, like, you know, what we've had is a collective experience of trauma. We need to now start the collective experience of healing.
Yeah. And there's going and there's going to be a lot of healing to do. Listen, there was a lot of healing to do anyway. Now we've got even more. You know, the therapists are going to be busy. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to jump over to the questions because we've had some really good questions this week, and it's great because we get such a good variety of questions. Some of them around lockdown and, you know, if it's going on, and some of them around things that are going on personally for people, because of course these things have been running in conjunction. Okay, so we've had this question in. Hello, and thank you in advance for your help with my question. Can you help me work out whether my partner is a narcissist or not? He is selfish and cold, and I keep finding myself Googling, is my boyfriend a narcissist? There's so many articles on that, by the way. I wrote a blog once about this, about how, you know, so many people Google this, and I researched how many, I can't remember the number, but there's an enormous amount of articles. When I see this word all the time. He's selfish and cold, and I keep finding myself, yeah, I've said that already. I find that he isn't there for me and puts me down and criticizes me a lot. My mum always said my dad was a narcissist, and growing up my dad did this thing of putting me on a pedestal and then just abandoning me. He'd go missing for days with other women. I seem to keep choosing men that are the same, even though they're always really lovely in the beginning. They then change. Okay, so I'm going to jump in on this question because there's so many points here that I'd like to cover. So the first thing I would say is that we can't diagnose whether or not your partner, your boyfriend, is a narcissist or not. And that's not something that we can do here. We can just simply sort of shine a light on certain aspects of your question and talk about it, and in a way ask you to inquire of yourself. Really, I think the most important thing is, you know, am I getting my needs met? Am I happy? Is this person enhancing my life? Which is the, you know, it's what we want a relationship to do. I want to go in on the point you said at the end. I seem to keep choosing men that are the same, even though they're always really lovely in the beginning, they then turn. So, you know, the subconscious is an interesting thing. It's like a heat-seeking missile. It will always seek to resolve what was unsatisfactory. So if mummy or daddy were unavailable when you were younger, then it will often go towards partners that are unavailable in an attempt to unconsciously resolve those wounds. However, we cannot resolve them in that way. So a lot of the time, the people that come into our life, it doesn't just happen with romantic partners, it can happen with bosses, it can happen with business partners, it can happen with friends as well. Can be representatives, really. And your subconscious will sort of rub its hand in glee and think, great, I can now resolve this issue by the medium of this person that's come into your life, because the subconscious, there's no time. The subconscious doesn't understand linear time, feels like everything happened yesterday. So there's something called repetition compulsion, which is exactly what this is. You keep going out with the same person again and again. So you can think, oh, this person's different, and then you realize it's your ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend with a wig on. So I think that is a bit of what's potentially happening here, repetition compulsion. Now, until we really make a concerted effort to look at healing the wounds that were inflicted in childhood by a caregiver not being available, we can have this really strong compulsive behavior that will go towards these people and attempt to resolve it. And I think that it's really good to bring a ton of conscious awareness to it. Now, this thing as well, always really lovely in the beginning and then they turn. Now, I think it's not that people change, it's that you just got to know them, you know. So everyone's really lovely in the beginning. You know, first few months, we're going out with an advert, first few weeks, depending how it lasts. Everyone's really lovely in the beginning. You know, we are going out with an advert. No one's going to sort of walk up to you in bar and say, oh, I'm, you know, selfish and, you know, going to criticize you all the time and put you down. They're not going to do that. They're going to put the best foot forward. That's how we all do it, right? So it's important sometimes to take relationships slowly in this way, to find out who they are before you get involved. If you grew up with a dad that was like this, you're going to have a tendency to go towards people that are like this. I would ask you the question about whether he's a narcissist. You know, in a way, we've all got an element of narcissism in us, because none of us were fully met in childhood. And, you know, what narcissism is, you know, in a way, what I touched on earlier, which is creating this great big facade. You know, there's a sliding scale of it, of I am amazing, I am special, everyone has to agree with me. This is sort of the top end of it. Nothing really matters apart from me. You know, you must all orbit around me. My needs are important, yours aren't. And if that's your experience of being in a relationship, then you're not going to get your needs met. And we're only as needy as our unmet needs. And what people can do, especially women, I've seen it a lot, is they blame themselves. They think they need to be more confident, or they think they need to have better self-esteem in the relationship. And a lot of the time, you know, yes, if your self-esteem is good, you won't choose these people as much, you know, or you'll be aware of it. You may still be attracted to them, but you will make the decision that yourself and your self-love is more important than that. But you know, it's really important to ask yourself about, you know, how's this relationship leaving you feeling? And, you know, the cure for narcissism is actually vulnerability. You know, for somebody wanting to heal themselves, their own narcissistic tendency is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And a good relationship, there will be a lot of vulnerability. You know, you're allowed to be vulnerable with them, they will be vulnerable with you. And if you're noticing that there's a lack of that after, you know, no one's going to be, you know, opening up on day one, and neither should we. Don't want to try and hotwire intimacy, but, you know, there needs to be, if you've been with this person for a certain amount of time and you're not able to talk to them openly and be who you are, then I think that is an issue, that, you know, that you deserve to be happy. And sometimes when we've been repeating patterns, then it's good to take some time out and think about actually what you want to bring in next. So I would ask less about whether they're a narcissist and more about how it's leaving you feeling, because we can get very focused on, so many people are very focused on, oh, they're a narcissist, and are they a narcissist, and da. The fact that you're Googling whether he's a narcissist suggests that perhaps you're not that happy in the relationship. And I think the question to ask yourself is, how is this leaving me feeling on a daily basis? And if you can't talk to this person about how their lack of support or criticism is making you feel, then that's an issue too, because we've got to be able to talk about things. So I'll pass over to Neil as well, because I'm sure he's got a wealth of information on this subject.
Well, yeah, the first thing I'm going to say is the worst thing you can possibly do when you're concerned about something is Google it. Because, you know, and I've done this before, you have an itch and you Google it and Google tells you you've got herpes, and it's like, no, don't, by the way, just in case. But like, you know, what I'm saying is sometimes that you will find what you're looking. Yes, you will find what you're looking for. And if you know, it's basically how the brain works. If you put a thought into your brain, like you know, oh, Zoe's a lovely person, then there's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system that is now looking for reasons to justify that. So we are, oh, the way she flicked her hair, she's so lovely. But if my reticular activating system is implanted with the thought that Zoe's a horrible, nasty person, then it's like, oh, look at the way she flicked her hair, she's so in her ego. Like, I can take the same information and use it to justify whatever it is I have perceived internally, right? That is the way that the brain works. So what I'm saying is, if you planted a seed and then you go off you know, holding that seed in your mind, you'll find reasons to justify that. So there's a couple of things I want to say, and I'm saying this with love and respect to empower you, not to make you feel bad. But if you found that you've had multiple relationships with the same experience, there is one basic common denominator: you are still there, right? So what this is doing, the universe is basically saying that there's something you haven't learned or healed. It's very much kind of connecting to what Zoe was sharing already. So ultimately, is it that the person that you've attracted is of a particular way and may have narcissistic tendencies? Or is it that because of some of our own underlying fears and insecurities, we're projecting something out which is enabling that behavior? This is where people can often end up in relationships, multiple relationships, where they get cheated on. because you have this kind of core wound, a trigger experience where you were cheated on once, and then you go into future relationships with a fear and concerns that they cheating on me, and you've got real insecurities. And the more you harbor these beliefs, whether you express that externally or not, that will consciously or subconsciously impact the way you show up in the relationship. There will be doubt that you'll put out. And if you tell a kid they're stupid for long enough, they might actually start believing it. If you are harboring doubt and fears and insecurities about someone, will that potentially impact the way that they feel, act, and show up? I'm not saying that that justifies whatever kind of negative behaviors that people show up with, but what I'm saying is for you to break this cycle, you have to look at what's within your control. You can't control other people's behaviors, but you can control your own. You can control how you choose to react. Now, again, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying, if there are negative behaviors that you're experiencing, you're being subject to, I'm not saying that's okay, but I'm asking you to look at how you can regain control of the bit that is firmly within your grasp. That is your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, your story, and what's going on inside of you. When you change that, when you change what's going on inside, the world is a reflection of that. And if nothing else, if it doesn't work out in the relationship you're with, hopefully by doing that internal work, the next time that you, number one, attract the right kind of person, and if you are in any way contributing or enabling that kind of behavior, you are kind of breaking that off at source. So this is one of the things that said, and I know it may sound like I may not necessarily be agreeing with everything you're saying. I'm trying to empower you. I'm trying to get you to think about, how do you take back control of this circumstance? And the way to do that is reflect on what can I do differently? How can I show up differently? How can I deal with the stuff that's going on inside of here? Because at some level, you are contributing to this. And don't say that to make you feel bad. But if you are there in each of these relationships and this keeps happening, you have to consider, what is your contribution to this? It could be 5%, it could be 10%, it could be 50%, it could be 80%, I don't know. But there is a percentage of the way you show up that is a part of the situation. That's the bit that you have total power over. And when we can grasp that, we can actually start taking positive action to be able to ensure we are part of the healing process.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point about, okay, so, looking at, and bringing so much compassion to yourself as you do that, knowing that, okay, so here's the situation of going out with this kind of person again, and, it's so common, and it can take, repetition compulsion is, it's strongly embedded, you've got to be really kind to yourself about it, but know that it is something that you can change. Yeah, it can be like reversing an oil tanker, but it's worth it, you're worth it, and you deserve to be in a relationship with yourself that's happy and a relationship with someone else that's happy. So it can be really addictive to Google things for endless things that, and we can diagnose someone with sociopathy, NPD, all sorts of things, and there's so many articles on narcissism, and the most important thing is, okay, how do I feel in this relationship? How do I feel in my relationship with myself? And I would suggest you gently explore it and bring it back to you. And sounds like you're already starting to do that. You're doing a bit of review of other relationships, and perhaps there's some healing to do around childhood there as well. I think that's important. Okay, so on to the next one. Hello. Firstly, I want to say thank you for all that you do. Thank you very much. I'm a hypnotherapist too. Okay, and it's great to hear all of your advice every week. I find it really useful. Thank you. I wanted to ask your advice as being a therapist, mental health worker. I feel a bit embarrassed about being in this situation. I've been extremely busy since last year, but I'm suffering with burnout. But I don't feel able to stop working, as the beginning of last year got me into so much debt. I feel really, I feel like I can't talk to anyone about this because I am a therapist and I'm meant to be the person that's got everything together. But I feel like I'm starting to suffer with some anxiety and depression myself, even though that's what I'm helping other people with. Do you have any suggestions? Okay, I'm going to go over to Neil first of all.
Yeah, and it's a great question. You would never dream of going into your mechanic's garage and saying, "Oh, I bet your car never breaks down." You'd never go into your doctor's surgery and say, "Oh, I bet you never get ill." Of course the doctor gets ill. Of course the mechanic's car breaks down. And this is something that, I think particularly over the last 6 or 7 years, I've got very comfortable expressing, because people believe, because I work in mental health, because I've been running the stress management site for 20 years, because I train other people on how to deliver programs. I've written books on the subject. People believe I never get stressed, that I'm constantly walking around in a Zen state. People that know me know that's so far from the truth. And sorry, I'm sure you can attest to that. I get stressed just like everyone else. In fact, I probably get stressed more than most people, because I'm kind of dealing with a lot of crazy stuff in the world at the moment. But the reality is I can recognize it. I know what action to take to address it. But that doesn't mean I don't experience it. So actually, the statement you've made is a really interesting one that I feel like I need to have my stuff together. That is coming from your ego, right? And again, I say this with love. But the ego can show up in one of two different ways. It could be, look at me, I'm so great, I'm so wonderful, I'm superhuman, I can deal with everything. Or it could be, I'm pathetic, I'm weak, I'm useless, I'm, imposter syndrome, all of that. That's the other end of the ego spectrum. Now, when we can get to a place where kind of we're freeing ourselves from the ego trap, and it's just like, it is what it is. Right now, if I survey the landscape of my life, I feel pretty shit. That's okay. And actually being okay, not being okay, is a real sign of strength, and our willingness to be vulnerable is one of the greatest strengths that we have. Because when you are able to do that as a professional, as a therapist, what message are you delivering to the world, to your clients, to your patients, to people that come into contact with you, that, it's okay, we're all human, we all go through this journey. And I'll put my hand up to say, I've had real troubles and challenges over the last 12 months. It's been a very tough time. That doesn't mean I'm any less good at my job. It doesn't mean that I'm not, what I've got to say is not of any value. But I'm being able to be honest, about the fact that I am going to experience these things just like everybody else does. And I think when we can get comfortable with that, we can recognize that we're all fallible. There's no one that's superhuman. As far as I'm aware, Superman hasn't arrived on the planet yet. So the rest of us, we've got our fallibilities. But when we are able to recognize that, and we put down that veneer, the kind of the image, and we're able to be a little bit more authentic, is when we're actually starting to recognize the fact that, every day is a unique challenge and battle that we're going to have to face life, and we're going to have to deal with what's thrown at us. And some days we're going to do great, and then some days we will struggle. And those days we struggle, it's okay to be held, and it's okay to ask for help and support. Because how can, particularly for us in the therapeutic community, how can we be expected to support other people if we're not willing to be supported ourselves? Yeah. Do you trust your product enough to consume it yourself? And that's the thing that I put out to people. Because yes, over the last 12 months, I have turned to friends and colleagues, and I've asked for therapeutic interventions because I've been through a tough time. That doesn't make me any less good at my job or any less valuable of a human being.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd really, really second that. First of all, you're allowed to be human. Second of all, I would also, on a practical level, say, I don't know what, I can't tell from your question whether or not you're getting supervision, but if you're not, then I think it's probably a really important time. If you're seeing more clients, I know that, I've been doing support for 19 years. I'm so old. 19 years now. I know.
She started when she was 10.
Yeah, exactly. I was like a sort of those genius children. But I 19 years, and the last year I've never experienced dealing with so much distress, huge levels of distress, and of course it takes its toll, of course it's taxing, and we can get so hooked up, and of course we want to help everybody, of course we want to be good at our job. I have associates, I have a team of like 10, so I can sort of like spread the work out where appropriate, because I do a lot of the complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, then a lot of that work I will often do myself. But I think it's really important to take breaks. You've got to take breaks, you've got to switch the phone off, you've got to ring fence time for you, otherwise you will get burnt out. And then when you get burnt out, you start getting resentful. The thing is, the answer to everything is always support. So I would say, if you're able to afford it, and if you are busy, then it's really important that you get support. I've got an invisible army behind me, supporting me, because I support an enormous amount of people, and then I have people supporting me. And I think it's really, really important when you're giving it out, because that thing, you can't pour from an empty cup, and you'll start to feel the symptoms of burnout. Neil would be you know, even better than this on me, which is kind of like irritable, resentful. You know, we start to feel resentful about seeing a client. Oh, I'm too tired, I can't bother to see them. Exhausted, all of those things. And there is nothing, you know, I can understand the anxiety about, you know, getting in debt, so you've got to pay it off. But you know, if there's ways that you can take the pressure off yourself a bit with that, I don't know, maybe spread out the payments a bit more, something like that. See if you can get grants, things like that. Because a lot of time we get so busy, we don't investigate what help there is out there for us. But there's no shame in any of it. And we're always learning about boundaries all the time. I'm still learning about boundaries now. Like, you know, 20 years ago, I didn't have boundary if it hit me in the face. But I'm still learning about boundaries now. And perhaps there's something here for you about boundaries as well. And actually, sounds like you're giving loads out, which we can all do. You know, if you work in mental health, that's what can happen. You end up giving out a lot because, you know, there's a lot of help is required. And we're under pressure in different ways in mental health, you know, whether to speak out about what's going on, whether not to, you know, new levels of issues, a higher volume, you know, a lot of people can't afford it. So we'll want to support people in some way. You know, I get asked a lot of questions, people that can't necessarily see me for therapy, although I do free work as well. Obviously I've got capacity in that, but you know, a lot of people will ask me questions. So there's, you know, there has been a level of pressure for us too, and I don't think there's any shame in it. I think it's great that you reached out and asked us about it, and I said, let yourself be human, give yourself more support, get yourself some more support, however that is. Even you just reaching out and doing this, getting yourself some support, and you know, acknowledge it and set some better boundaries for yourself around your time. I
just want to add to this, that we, over the last couple of years, have been working with a number of carer support organisations. So carer support is basically, if you're a primary carer, if you're with someone that's old or ill or you know, has some kind of disability or needs care, basically. And you know, this can sometimes be children. It could be, you know, a partner. It could be a parent, or it could be a child caring for their parent. Now, when someone is ill or compromised, the focus tends to be on the one that's compromised. But what people often forget is the people around them are also suffering, and they typically don't get the support. If you've got someone that is, you know, terminally ill with cancer, for example, the focus is on the patient that is sadly, you know, slowly passing away. But what about the people that are caring for them? They're going through a tremendous period of trauma, and they may not well get the support. As the professional carer, because you're in the therapeutic field, you are basically holding space and supporting your clients, your patients, your customers, wherever you choose to call them. Who's supporting you? And if you're not being held, how can you possibly hold somebody else? And this is where obviously supervision can be useful. Having a support network with friends, family, partner, loved ones, neighbors, colleagues. But also, you know, again, this is where potentially it may be useful getting access to some therapeutic support yourself. You know, supervision can help, but actually sort of working with a completely impartial, disconnected therapist can be tremendously valuable. I've found that, you know, there have been times where I've gone to people completely outside of my network that don't know me, have never worked with me, don't know my background, because I'm completely able to have a totally professional, impartial interaction with them. And that can be really, really valuable. So something to consider.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, any work on yourself, I think is great. I love, you know, the work on yourself. You know, we can't always do it financially, but you know, when you can, you know, I think it's a great thing to do, because it's just, you know, it's an investment in yourself, and it just helps you become really whole in a way that, like I said, going back to my earlier words, that is what really great mental health is about. One of the most important factors. Okay, we've got a question about CPTSD. So I hope you're well. I suffer with CPTSD from sexual abuse from an ex-partner. I've done a lot of trauma therapy and have most of the day-to-day stuff under control. Good, well done. But recently, if anyone is talking about sex, it triggers flashbacks, which hasn't happened for months. I'm also having very intense dreams with the same theme, running away from someone and unable to escape. Do you have any advice on what I can do? Thank you for your time. Okay, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge what you've gone through and say, I'm so sorry that you went through that and that you're suffering with CPTSD. And well done for the trauma therapy, because I know that it isn't easy, because you have to face big stuff, and well done for getting day-to-day stuff under control. The thing I'd say about CPTSD and recovering from any serious trauma is that it is quite confusing in terms of we all want to think of recovery as a linear ascent. I'll get better and better and better and better and better, and I feel bad again. But it's never like that. It's really jagged, you know, and we can go through these big phases where wherever we're recovering from anything at all, actually, anxiety, depression, phobia, physical illness, CPTSD, severe trauma, narcissistic relationship, you know, abuse, anything like that. And we can go through these big swathes and periods and think, well, that's it, that's gone. I haven't got that thing anymore. And then suddenly out of nowhere, it comes back up again. Who knows why, or perhaps it's because there's a little part of your subconscious say, hey, this needs some more healing. So first of all, I'd say, of course, talk to your therapist about it. It sounds like you've got someone good. And second of all, I think one of the most important self-care practices we can do if we're suffering from CPTSD or PTSD, or in fact anything actually, is self-parenting. So there is part of you, when you've gone through a trauma, what happens is part of you breaks off and stays stuck at that age. So whether it's 2 or whether it's 25 or when it's 35 or 45, you go through a trauma and it breaks off this part of you, it becomes like a sub-personality. Now that part of you holds on to all of the trauma and the unprocessed emotion, and it gets stuck in that aspect of you. And then that's what a trigger is. So you go into a situation, in your case, someone talks about sex, and that part of you that went through that horrific experience suddenly, you know, jumps into protection and it floods your system. And I always think it's a bit like that, you know, it's almost like a hostile takeover, a trigger. Don't have any time to sort of go, hey, hang on a minute, is this reasonable or rational for me to have this trigger? It just happens like that. It's physiological flooding. So I would say to you on a sort of practical day-to-day level, use that self-parenting thing of talking to yourself in really kind ways, because what your subconscious mind is doing is not really understanding that it's over. So you let your subconscious know, we're safe now, this is over, we have support, I am connected with others, and you bring some compassion to yourself for having gone through a really horrendous experience, and remind yourself right now, right here in this present moment, I'm safe. And you can talk to yourself, you know, a bit on a daily basis, and just say to yourself, okay, sometimes people will talk about sex because it comes up, like it's everywhere, isn't it, in articles and stuff like that. People will talk about it. Now, I know that triggers me, and so I'm going to be really compassionate with myself about that, and just start reminding myself on a daily basis that period of my time, that period of my life is over, that I'm safe and that I'm okay, and bring yourself back into the present moment. The dreams that you're having, again, I think it's something to talk to your therapist about, you know, running away from someone and unable to escape. Well, that's feeling trapped. You know, we fear what's already happened. You've already gone through that experience. So again, talking to yourself, reminding that part of you in a kind way that actually it's okay, that this is over. And you can, with CPTSD, it's very usual for your to feel anxious at night. It's one of the main symptoms, I think. It's almost like your body chemistry changes at night. So I would have a really great self-soothing, self-parenting technique at bedtime, and maybe say to your subconscious, I don't need to have any of those dreams. It's okay if I have those dreams. We don't want to go into resistance about it. But, you know, I'm working through this, I am safe. And, you know, and imagine just sort of comforting that part of you, or, you know, imagine yourself as a little inner child and letting that part of you know that you're all right, that you're safe and that everything's okay. Because it's that kind of like kind adult part of you, the self-parenting part. Self-parenting is hard work, but it's so worth it. It's one of the main recovery tools for CPTSD. That is what is going to help heal these things, which are temporary. It's just another phase of your healing that you'll go through. Both of these things will, as long as you're doing the trauma therapy and taking care of yourself and working on self-care, will one day be a thing of the past. So it's worth reminding yourself of that as well. I hope that's helpful. I don't know if you want to add to anything. That's Neil.
No, obviously this is your area of expertise, Zoe, so I don't have a huge amount to add. I guess, you know, the thing that I would say is that there was obviously a core wound which led to that trigger being created, and then when you're exposed to these kind of messages, it's bringing up the pain of that old trauma. When we have overridden that old trauma with new and fresh perspectives, for example, if there is an association, an anchor to do with sex that brings up pain and fear and anxiety, every time you get exposed to a sexual message and that it's bringing up those feelings, if you have worked through this both by number one therapeutically, but also by overlaying that with new sort of beliefs. And again, I don't know much about the individual, if they're in a relationship, if they've got a happy, healthy, fulfilling sex life. But when you can get to the point where the association with sex and sexuality isn't pain and trauma, but is connection, is love, is intimacy, that when exposed to the message of sex, it's going to bring up different feelings. And I think this is where also we do find ourselves in a world where this is out of balance, not just for people that have trauma. And, you know, if I speak a little bit more broadly, the amount of people that may consume pornography, for example, that's kind of their association with sex and sexuality. So the trigger when you're exposed to a sexual message or, you know, image that could have sexual connotations, is their natural reaction a feeling of love and connection, or is it, you know, like hardcore sex pornography that they've seen online? And this is really where my concern is, that people think it's harmless. I'm not so sure it is. Because ultimately, are we now templating a generation with beliefs and behaviors because of the messages they've been exposed to? They're desensitized to kind of, you know, really what potentially this is templating them with. So I think this is really where it's being very careful about the associations we create, the anchors we create, and the beliefs that we hold. And a big part of that, the process of kind of reprogramming that, is to start creating more positive associations and positive anchors. So again, I don't know the individual circumstance, if they are in a relationship, if it's something that potentially they could work with their partner on, is to create sort of time and space where it's safe, it's nourishing, there are clear boundaries, and it's a gentle exploration, which is now starting to create a more positive connection with sex and sexuality. I don't know what your thoughts are. Obviously, you're more of an expert than I am.
No, I think that's great, because, you know, I think the subconscious is all about association. So as well as healing old wounds, it's about creating new associations that are positive and helpful and anchoring those in. And, you know, if you're not in a relationship, it's about, you know, going back to what Neil said, then, you know, something like CPTSD, a lot of things are sometimes, you know, it's very, very in the body. So it's about creating a new relationship with your body, a new relationship with, so whether you're in, you know, if you're single, creating a new relationship with you being able to, and this is a slow thing, and this is something you heal the trauma first, and then you start to move towards it as you heal the trauma. You know, it's first things first. But it's also about, you know, reconnecting with your own body and knowing that it's, you know, your God-given right, your birthright, whatever, to be able to experience sexual pleasure in a good way that is nothing to do with violence or abuse. Now that can be a long journey and slow journey, and I think it's important that it's slow. You know, I think trauma happens fast and it happens in isolation, even if there's someone else there, which it was, there's a perpetrator, but the opposite needs to occur in that, because you feel alone in that situation. But the opposite needs to occur when you're healing, is you need to feel safe, you need to feel connected, you need to feel co-regulated, and a lot of time that needs to be slow. You know, the brain learns to be afraid very quickly, and it learns not to be afraid more slowly. It's just the way we're wired. And you know, fear is dominant over pleasure, so reduce the fear first, and then, you know, when you're ready, you know, you can start to associate, because sex is a great and wonderful thing, and it can actually be incredibly healing, but associating pleasurable feelings in your body that are a good thing, and that can start to replace the old, which is what is really important.
I just want to finish on that point by saying that, you know, in modern society we have demonized sex. It's dirty, it's been commoditized, and, you know, even things like tantra, like, you know, a lot of people think tantra is people just kind of getting together and having crazy, weird orgies and group sex. Whereas actually, tantra is a spiritual practice, not a sexual practice. The core essence of tantra is nothing to actually do with the sexual elements of it. It's to do with harnessing that sexual energy, which a lot of us hold in our genitals, and it's just literally expelled out through orgasm. Whereas actually, it's raising that energy up through the body and using that as life force. Now, in many circles of life, we understand this, which is why professional athletes, boxers, football players are told not to have sex, not to masturbate before a big game, because you'll be literally spunking out your life force, quite literally. This is why, particularly like if you're going into sort of meditation practices like Vipassana or shamanic practices, they ask you to abstain. The reason for that, it's one of our most potent energy forces, but because in modern society we've kind of we view that in a particular way. We've packaged it up in this kind of little, this is a dirty little secret. We don't talk about it. We don't express it. It's not a healthy thing to do. We've got some kind of belief systems we've created around sex and sexuality that are taking us away from its true power. It's a really powerful transformational experience. And again, whether something you'll harness yourself by learning to engage with that part of yourself, or it's something that we can express in a loving relationship. And I think this is something that we do need to get more comfortable having grown-up dialogues about. Because otherwise, how do we heal our collective wounds around sex and sexual trauma if we aren't able to even talk about it?
Yeah, definitely. And, I have two amazing sex coaches on my team, who've worked very much in that way that you're talking about, Neil. And it is, this is the thing. I think there's an enormous amount of collective shame around sex and sexuality, and we're talking about it at a broader level now, and I do think there's much healing to do around that for society and as a whole. And I would say to you, anyone who's experienced, going back to what I originally said around trauma, anyone who's experienced kind of sexual abuse, sexual trauma of any kind, it's really important to be so compassionate with yourself around the journey, but know as well that it's totally possible, and there's zero rush for you to be able to experience sexual pleasure and intimacy again, without in any way minimizing or, anyone's experience around any of that. But, I just think it's really important to have a hopeful message around that stuff too, because, when you've gone through these really painful experiences as a child or as an adult, you can think, that's just not for me. We can go into sort of sexual anorexia, if you like, and that is something to be healed. Again, like I say, it will always say slowly. Let's take our time. It's such a process. But, just know that it's entirely possible for you to be able to have those good experiences that we can think that we're never going to be able to have, but you can. And I think that's really important to have a message of hope around that as well.
Amazing.
Great.
Wow, some deep
yeah, we're going to deep dive today. Yeah, really good deep dive. Okay, so we are coming to the end, so we will say goodbye for now, wishing you all a lovely week of enjoying the sunshine and beer gardens, if that's your thing, or
what's in nature, because we're all about nature,
who you really are. Yeah, exactly.
And listen, keep engaged with us, use our social media platforms. We're here, we'll continue to provide support. We are working on the plan to keep the clinics going, so fingers crossed we'll be back in the very near future, hopefully next week, or if not in the very near future. Keep your questions coming in. We do this because we know this is important to you guys. The feedback, as I mentioned, that we got on the weekend by our colleague John, has really encouraged us to keep going with this. But we do this because you want it, and as long as you're asking for this and you need our support, we will do everything we can to keep going with this. So yeah, thank you all again for all of your support. Share the clinics with people that feel might benefit from it. Obviously do check out recoveryourspark.org. Obviously there's lots of resources there, and Time for Recovery. And yeah, we'll see you again very, very soon. Thanks, Zoe, for all your hard work on this.
Yeah, pleasure. Have a great week, everyone.
Take care.